Way back in the late 1970s, when I was down in Fayetteville, Arkansas, studying to be a lawyer, I had a number of experiences which at the time I was rather perplexed by. But looking back on it, I realized these experiences were instrumental in me becoming a priest. While I was down there and studying very hard, I was active at the little Catholic church there, St. Thomas Becket Newman Center with Father Joe Paulo. And that Sunday morning was my one relief from study. And I really enjoyed going. I was an usher, and they didn't have pews. You had to set up all these chairs in a row, and then when Mass was over, he took all the chairs down and he just swept the floor. She did. But the experiences that occurred during that time, at the time, really struck me as odd. One of it involved my criminal and constitutional law professor, Bob Knowlton. Father Knowlton, Professor Knowlton, he was no father. Well, he had kids, but he wasn't a priest at all. In fact, he was an agnostic. He was from Iowa. He played football for the University of Iowa and then volunteered for the Marine Corps right after Pearl Harbor. And he was in the Battle of Tinian. He's a big guy, even bigger than me. And he was in a bloody, bloody battle there, and he got wounded, and he came back, served very honorably, and then he became a lawyer. And he did many cases before the Supreme Court, became a professor, and in his last years decided he wanted to leave New Jersey, because that's where he did his main practice, and settle to someplace a little bit warmer, so he picked Arkansas. An agnostic. I share that because of what he said to me one day, out of the blue. He looked at me and he said, "You know, Joe, I think you're missing your profession. I think you should be a priest. And if you become a priest, you should become a Jesuit, because they're the smart ones." Well, I know some Jesuits. I don't know how smart they are. I mean, they're nice. But I still take being a diocesan priest. But that totally blew my mind. I wasn't at all thinking about being a priest. Then, a few months later, Mr. Skinner, the law librarian, because I did have a job in the law library to help pay my costs, he was the only Catholic on the staff of the law school down there. And I did see him at Mass with his family. And he took me aside one day and said, "You know, Joe, you're missing your calling. You ought to be a priest." Well, two people now, all right? And then there was a nun that worked at the center with Father Joe Paulo. One day she takes me inside and says, "You know, Joe, I think you'd make an excellent priest." Now, mind you, I have not given it a thought. Never gave it a thought. And yet, I've now had people. So it plants a seed in your mind. It puts a seed in your mind. And when I was ready to start thinking about it and pursue it, I talked with Father Joe Paulo, and he said, "Go to seminary, find out. You might be. If you go and decide you're not, that's fine. If you decide to go, that's great. But that's the place to decide. You don't go there already determined. You go there to think about it and pray about it for a number of years and study as well." And so I did, and it turned out that advice was good advice, but it planted the seeds. These people planted the seeds in my life that later grew. I share this with you because the priests across the diocese today are being asked to talk about vocations. And I think that all of you in one way or another, might know someone, friend, a relation that you might think might make a good priest. And I'm giving you full permission to say that to them. Say it very nice. Don't say, "You better go now." That won't work. You say, just think about it. Just tell them to think about it and pray about it, that you observe, something about their conduct, how they comport themselves, their spirituality, their coming to Mass. And these things, you'll be planting seeds in people's lives. Now in many cases, they'll be probably called to something else. But the point is that by planting those seeds, some people may be will start to think about it, that maybe they are indeed, the Holy Spirit maybe is indeed calling them to the priesthood, and that your planting that seed is in itself an act of the Holy Spirit. So have the courage, to think about some of your friends and family members, and have the courage to mention it to them. You never know that a number of years later, you might be attending an ordination.